Creating actions with the Babbage SDK could not be simpler. In this video, we're going to be using a simple web application with the Babbage SDK in order to create a simple Bitcoin transaction with an output that contains some satoshis, tokens in Bitcoin, and locks those satoshis using a custom output script. To demo this functionality, we're going to go into the projects directory, and we're going to set up a simple React app and install the Babbage SDK. After cloning the repo, let's go ahead and open up Visual Studio Code. And with VS Code open, now I'm going to open up the integrated terminal and install the dependencies for this project, running the command npm I. And once dependencies are installed, we're now going to start up the web environment. Once the web environment loads, your web browser should open automatically. Now let's go back and install the Babbage SDK. I'm going to open a new terminal here, and I'm going to run the installation command. Here you can see the command for installing the Babbage SDK into a JavaScript-based project. With the SDK installed, we're ready to open up the app.js file and start making our changes. At the top, we're going to import the Babbage SDK, and then we're going to start creating our first action. With the SDK imported, let's go ahead and hook up a button so that when we click on it, we can fire our first Bitcoin transaction. So we've got the button here. Now let's go ahead and add the onClick handler. So what happens when we click this button? Let's go ahead and actually create our first Bitcoin transaction and see just how simple that is. We'll give our action here a description. And every Bitcoin transaction defines some outputs. The outputs contain the satoshis that are going to be locked up into the output, as well as a script that defines the constraints under which the outputs can later be spent in Bitcoin. Let's go ahead and do that now. Here you can see we've just added one output to the array, and that's enough to get us started. We're going to create a transaction with one output. It's going to be true return, meaning anybody can spend this output, and there's going to be one satoshi of Bitcoin locked up in this transaction output. Finally, after the transaction is created, let's go ahead and just log the TXID for the created action onto the screen. And it looks like I forgot to make this function async because we're using the await keyword for promises in JavaScript. Saving the change here, it looks like our code is compiled successfully. Let's go check out the web browser. In the web browser, we have a new button set up here, and I'm going to open the JavaScript console so that we can see what happens when we click the button. And clicking the button, it looks like we've run into an error. Of course, this is because the user needs to install the MetaNet Client and have it running on their device if they don't already. When I run the MetaNet Client, now I'll try again after I've launched the MetaNet Client on my device. I'm just going to close out of the error here. I'll refresh the page just for good measure. And then I'll click the button again. This time you can see the Babbage SDK is communicating with the MetaNet Client to get my authorization in order to create this Bitcoin transaction. I'll approve the authorization. And after that's done, you can see in the JavaScript console the TXID of your first Bitcoin transaction has been printed out. Congratulations! Creating actions isn't all the Babbage SDK is good for, though. It's also possible to encrypt data with user-held keys to protect their privacy, facilitate micropayments between users to exchange value securely, and establish user identity without the need for trusted identity providers. If you'd like to learn more about the Babbage SDK and Bitcoin in general, I'd recommend going to projectbabbage.com. Thank you.